Hi, welcome to this lecture on measurement. First of all, um, we should talk about why we measure anything. Um, why do we measure anything? Like, imagine when you are cooking, why do you measure a cup of flour or a cup of water? Now, if we come to social work, why do we measure using any kind of instruments, assessment instruments? We measure whether somebody has a particular health condition or not. So, by just be thinking about why do we measure? So, if we had to define what measurement is basically a process of defining a concept. Through measurement, what we are doing is trying to define a particular concept, right? So again, we've used the example of homelessness in previous classes. So s- measuring how many people are homeless in a particular geographic area, what do you have to do? You have to actually define what homelessness means, right? Is a person homeless if they are living in their friend's place or living with one of their families? That's not their main house. Um, that's not, they don't have stable housing maybe, but are they homeless? So depending upon how you define a particular concept, you will measure it differently. It's also a process of knowing a concept. So similar again, homelessness, once you define and you start measuring it, you start learning more about homelessness. And even the question of, should we consider somebody staying at a friend's place as a person who is homeless or not? That is, you are kind of having a nuanced conversation about the concept of homelessness. So there are two different kinds of definitions in research: conceptual definitions and operational definitions. Conceptual definitions are ideas behind a research question. What are we studying? And operational definitions are the actual variables that we are studying and how we can observe and um, measure the concepts being studied. I'm going to start for this class. I'm going to start using the example of food security. So let's start with that, right? So um, a conceptual definition of food security, or think about what how would a conceptual definition of food security be different than an operational definition of food security. At a conceptual level, you might talk about, well, food security is having enough food, having enough nutrition um, to do whatever to do carry out the physical, emotional, social activities um, that we have, and maybe there's like a cultural aspect of food that we want, food security that we want to bring in, right? So we are thinking about the concept that is food security. But when we are operationalizing a particular concept, then we are asking, well, how do we measure food security as we have defined um, it conceptually? So there's this two levels almost of definition. One is conceptual, where we are trying to define what food security means, and then another is an operational, where we are asking, okay, how do we measure food security? You might have seen this, the levels of measurement before in some other class, but there are generally four different levels of measurement: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So, nominal basically what it does is it's categories. So, what category is, or anything that is defined by category, right? For example, you can think about religion. So if you're filling out a survey or something and it asks what religion you are, then you might write any particular kind of religion that you might follow, or no religion, um, depending upon your belief system. And one of the characteristics of nominal is that they're mutually exclusive, right? So everybody who answers Christians and everybody who answers Hindus are theoretically, you can separate them into two different categories. So, and another thing about nominal categories is that there's no ranking, right? There's no like high, low, it's just different categories. Um, then the next level of measurement is ordinal. So now by ordinal, these are still categories, but they are categories in a particular order, right? So you can think about satisfaction level. So you can have low satisfaction, medium satisfaction, high satisfaction. You can think about whether you agree or disagree to a particular topic or a statement, right? You like yes, agree, I neutral, don't agree, right? So there's a certain order to them, and these are also mutually exclusive, and there's a fixed order. And interval, and this is a little tricky one. I It's very hard to find any example besides temperature. So in an interval, it's a continuous variable. So it'll go like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are obviously mutually exclusive. They have a fixed order. So if you think about temperature, and I say 15 degrees, 20 degrees, 25 degrees, then you can say that those temperatures are in order, and they're getting warmer. Right? They represent warmer temperatures, and they have equal space between them. So there's equal space between 15 degrees and 20 degrees, and 20 degrees and 25 degrees. You cannot say the same thing about an ordinal measure, right? You cannot say there's an equal space between being neutral and agreeing to something versus being neutral and disagreeing with something. There is no way to say that there's an equal space. But the interesting thing about interval measurement is that it doesn't have a true zero. What true zero means is it's like a lack of something. So if I say 0 degree Fahrenheit or 0 degree Celsius, that doesn't mean there's a lack of temperature, right? It means it's actually really cold, right? So it doesn't have a true zero. A true zero means that's the end of the line. There is really um, zero means there's nothing of that particular object. So we generally don't come across this interval level of measurement. We do come across a ratio level of measurement, which is similar to interval, right? For example, income. So you can think about $1, $2, $3. They're in a fixed order, right? And there's equal space. The space between $5 and $10 is equal um, compared to the space between $10 and $15. And however, in ratio, there's a true zero, right? When you have $0, that means you don't have any money. Or you can think about something like education. So you can think about education going from like 0 years of education to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 0 years of education means you don't have like a formal education. So here's kind of like a figure that I like. So qualitative means or categorical. Because an example is nationality, where you're American, Canadian, British. They are mutually exclusive, and I again say theoretically mutually exclusive. Um, but there is a possibility that you might have more than two citizenships. And then there's ordinal, which is low and high. You can think about particular orders. And then So we're talking about ordinal level of measurement. So you can think about low cooperation, high cooperation, or high violence, low violence. And again, temperature as the example for interval level of measurement, and ratio being similar to interval, but it has a true zero. In this example, there's five people in this group, and if you had zero, that means you don't have anybody in your group. Um, so we'll talk about quantitative and qualitative measurements. And in quantitative measurement, basically you are assigning numbers or values to a particular concept, right? So if you think about food security, homelessness, you are trying to assign numbers. Many studies that you will read in social work or psychology or like health settings, they use standardized measures, right? You have a particular tool that is a standardized measure to measure something. Like, for example, a depression scale is a standardized measure. And you can think about standardized measure for both like individuals or even for organizations. So it doesn't matter what level it is. You can have a standardized measure for basically anything, or a household, or a family, or a community. So one of the advantages of using quantitative measurement is that, or sorry, a standardized measure is that generally, if it's a standardized measure, that means its reliability and validity have been tested. We'll talk more about what that means. But the disadvantage is that it doesn't exactly measure what you want, right? Somebody else developed the standardized measure for their particular situation, and you are taking that and you are trying to measure what you need. So it doesn't always work. And so some researchers or evaluators in agency context design their own measures or survey instruments. So let's talk about reliability and validity. These are very important, mainly in when collecting quantitative data, when using quantitative measures. So reliability basically means that a particular experiment, a measurement, test, or procedure, any kind of thing that you use in research, it yields the same results every time. Right? I'll give a very simple example for this. But let's talk about validity also. Uh, Validity is basically understanding whether a particular measure measures what it says it's measuring. Right? So now let's use an example of height. Uh, so some kind of a height measuring device, let's call it. We would call if the height measuring device gives you, let's say, tells you like I'm 5'11", right? It tells me at one point that I am 5'10". It tells me another point I'm 6'2". It tells me another point I'm like 5'4". It's not giving me the same results in multiple attempts, right? So that means that's not reliable. If it gives me the same results every time, then that means yes, it is reliable. And validity would be if it actually measures my height, right? If I bring a machine and it starts measuring my weight, my blood pressure, then it's actually not measuring what it's intended to measure. Now, this might seem simple, but when we are talking about complicated concepts like food security, then having a measure that actually measures food security is very important. It's actually hard to design. So, in short, reliability is how dependent it is. It produces the same results again and again. And validity is how close to the truth it is, or reality it is, that it like measures what it is intending to measure. So here's a chart that is very helpful in thinking about what is reliable and what is valid. So you can take some time to look at this. But where you want to be with any kind of a standard measures is on the fourth quadrant, which is both reliable and valid. Right? It's hitting the bullseye, so it's valid. It's measuring what you want it to measure, and it is consistently hitting the bullseye So it is both reliable and valid compared to the one next to it, where it is consistently giving you the same results, right? But it's very far away from what it's supposed to be measuring. So now let's take an example of how USDA measures food security, right? So USDA asks 18 questions to determine whether a household is food secure or not. I've attached a PDF of that questionnaire in Moodle, so make sure you download that and look at it. And so food secure conditions are indicated by responses of often or sometimes to questions 1 to 3 and 11 to 13. Almost every month or some months, but not every month, to questions 5, 10, and 17, and yes to the other questions. And household is classified food insecure if they report 3 or more food insecure conditions. Right, so this is a way that USDA has designed to measure food security in US, and a lot of data is collected based on this measure, and a lot of money is actually allocated based on this result. So look at the make sure you look at the PDF right now before we go to the next slide, so you can pause the video. And there's a website at the bottom, so if you want more information you can look at that website also. So now the question is the food security questionnaire reliable? Will it give the same results again and again? So if it once says a house is food insecure, if measured again and again, will it give the same result, right? If it says food secure once, not food insecure once, then it's not reliable. Is the food security questionnaire valid? Is it actually measuring food security, the concept, or not? Right. So these are two questions, and these are not easy questions to answer. One way to think about reliability is so reliability most of the time is tested statistically. You don't just look at questions and say, oh, these are reliable or not. So you like apply it, get the results, and then test if they are reliable or not. So one way is repeated measures, where you have the same person take the same test at two different occasions, like in a week, maybe like now and then like 2 weeks later, and then compare the scores to see if there's any differences. If the scores are similar, then that means it has reliability. And another way is designing a survey so that you can split it into two halves, and comparing if the results on the first half are similar to results on the second half. And you can do this even within, you don't have to split it in half, but if you have taken any kind of a survey, you will realize, you'll feel that, oh, these questions are so redundant. Like I feel like I already answered that question. That is done purposefully, because what they want to do is um, ask you similar questions and see how you answer, so that they can combine the answer and see if you are giving you if the answers, if the questions are reliable or not. And if the questions are not reliable, they throw those questions out. um, and validity is even more complicated, because it involves both using statistical techniques and also using expert judgment. So the main idea is construct validity, which is the larger idea under which all other validities are kind of subsumes, like the construct validity subsumes all other validity. So basic question in construct validity is whether that instrument or that measure measures all aspect of the construct it is supposed to measure. So for example, let's say one of the examples is content validity. Um, So now here is, does it measure all aspects of the conceptual definition, right? For example, food security might have access to food, affordability of food, cultural appropriateness of food, like all that, all those questions, all those kind of smaller components within the larger idea of food security. So So we have all these different aspects of food security, and the question is, does it measure all the different aspects of food security? If it only measures affordability and not cultural appropriateness, it's lacking, right? It's not a valid measure. Another way to think about validity is criterion validity. So the results of this measure, whether it corresponds to a particular outcome or not. So, for example, with lots of evidence that shows that households that are in live under poverty are likely to be food insecure. So, if your measure finds out that a particular household is food insecure, then we can also ask, is this household poor also? And let's say, like, household is middle class, but the measure is showing that that household is food insecure, then we want to ask more questions about what's going on. So validity and reliability are both important concepts, not the easiest of things to find out. So think about whatever assessments you use in your practice or in your agencies, in your internships, and start questioning whether these assessments are valid and reliable. No matter how much work we do in when we are trying to measure complex social concepts, there is always going to be error. You have to remember that. So kind of try to memorize it that a measured value is always equal to true value plus error. So that error piece is always going to be there, and you cannot ignore it, no matter how much, whatever anybody says. When you are measuring complex social concepts, like food security, you'll always have some level of error. So now, what about in qualitative studies? Like, what does measurement even mean in a qualitative study? A lot of social work research is done based on qualitative studies, so it's important to understand this. So in qualitative studies, the process is reversed a little bit, right? In quantitative studies, you define a particular concept and you figure out how to measure it. But you then measure it and then you collect data. Now, in qualitative study, it's a little bit different. Like you might have a certain idea of what a particular concept means, but then you collect data first, and then you organize that data to define operationally what that term means. So, for example, let's again use the food security example. So, if I was doing a quantitative study, I would say food security means this, right? I have a conceptual definition, and then I will say I will measure food security using this USDA questionnaire. So that's my operational definition, and then I will go and collect data. But in a qualitative study, I would be like, okay, I think food security means this. This is like the definition from the literature. Um, so I'll just ask people are um, who are from food insecure households, and I'll ask them what does food security mean to them. Um, and so they will give me a bunch of answers, and then I will think about or measure or define food security based on all those answers. So it's not that we don't measure in qualitative approaches, but the steps are a little bit different. So there's also ideas of reliability and validity in qualitative research, right? So in qualitative research, reliability is gained through a consistent process for data collection, so that similar process is used for one person to the next. Um, then even the set of questions that are asked and the order those questions are asked, you might have that fixed to make it more reliable. But the understanding is that in qualitative studies, we are not just considering the person, the household, but like the bigger context also. So we understand that the context could be changing and that we may not actually get the same answers most of the time, right? Different cultures, we will not get the same answers. So reliability is important, but not as important or as a central concept in qualitative research as in quantitative research. There is also inter-rater reliability, which in qualitative research, which is once we collect data, we might have two people analyzing the same data to see if they come to the same results or not. So you can actually statistically calculate what is the inter-rater reliability between the two people who are analyzing the data. And so this idea of validity is that whether your concept or measurement is close to the reality, it almost emerges from the process, right? So in quantitative, because researcher is defining a concept and then going to collect data based on their definition, you have to figure out whether that is close to the reality or not. But in qualitative, you are asking questions to people who are actually experiencing food security, so they get to define it. So in that sense, because of that process, there is more less worry about validity because you are depending on the definitions of people who are actually experiencing food security insecurity. So another way to in qualitative research, another way to think about validity is this idea of member checking. So member checking is um, basically, you in qualitative study you cannot have a large sample size, right? So you might talk to 5 people, 10 people, and then you get some analysis and some data and some themes. And so you can go and present those themes back to more people, like let's say in a focus group or something, and ask what they think about the themes. And if they say, oh, that doesn't make any sense to me, then you have to consider what might be the differences and why are the themes that you collected so different than what this other group of people are experiencing, right? Or other, if they say, oh yeah, that's exactly what I am experiencing, or that's been my experience, then there's more match between the data you collected and the broader community experience. So it's a little bit tricky, but you can think about validity in qualitative studies also. um, Thank you. Yeah, this is it. See you next time.